Hi there, my name is Mark Beuchet and I'm the former guitarist with thrash metal band Annihilated, and I'm just making a short little video here because I've never really done many interviews, and most of our interviews are probably more about the lyrics and politics of the band, that kind of thing. So now that I've left the band, I just wanted to do something kind of just talking a little bit about the albums that we did and the music and the way that we sort of went about recording things for good or for bad. So I joined the band in 1985. I'd met them a few years before that when we'd done a few gigs with my old punk band called Poison, and in 1985 they'd had a little bit of a change around, and I got a phone call from Ray, the manager, saying would I like to go along and audition for being Annihilated, which obviously I did, and here we are. So at that time it was much more of a punk band really, but my style of playing was a little bit more riffy because I liked heavy metal and that as well, and so did Si. So obviously once we kind of got together, we started making things, you know, punk songs with a little bit more of a metally kind of edge to them. So it took quite a few years to sort of evolve into what we ended up being, but that's really how it started out. So I wasn't on the first ever demo because I think they did that just before I joined the band, so that's a very punk sort of demo. But the first demo I did with the band was sometimes known as the Speedwell demo or the Garden Shed demo, and that was this guy that we knew had a 16-track recording studio in a shed in his garden, so we went and recorded there, which was fun. And then shortly after that we then did the EP Path to Destruction. Now probably not that many people know this, but it was self-funded, but it was actually funded by Si's dad Ray, who was the manager of the band, and as I understand it he was made redundant and he used this redundancy money to pay for us to do this. So if it wasn't for him, you know, I don't know that we would have got anywhere. And obviously he did a lot for us. Artwork of the EP is by Mid, Deviated Instinct, and I expect you've seen it anyway, but it's absolutely brilliant. Downside was that they printed the photograph of us on the back the wrong way round, so I've become Si, Bod has become Lee, and yeah, wrong way around anyway. But that was probably, you know, kind of one of those things that whenever we did something there'd be something or other that would go wrong, and so for this it was that. We recorded this at a recording studio in Norwich, and I'm trying to remember what it's called now, The Kitchen, that was it, May 1986. And we only met them because we went to see this place called The Cartel, who's a big record distribution place, and we had a word with them. They said, oh, there's these guys along the hallway and they've got a recording studio, and you know, go and see them, and we did. And to be honest, I don't think they knew what to do with this and the noise that we made. I think they were much more into kind of indie sort of stuff and gentle, nice things, and we came in and made a racket and drank a load of beer, and I don't think they quite knew how to take it, and they were pretty worried about all their precious equipment and everything with us around. So it's pretty raw sort of sounding EP, but it's got its, you know, it is what it is. It's 1986 and that's what we did. And I did recently get hold of the master tapes of this and had it converted onto a digital format, and the problem was that they'd actually, when they recorded it, they basically compressed everything to within an inch of its life and beyond, and there's not a lot you can do with that, so all the reverb and compression and everything was already on the tracks that they'd recorded, so I couldn't do a huge amount to make it better, but I did make improvements on it, just cleaning it up. And it was re-released on vinyl on an Italian label, but obviously this has been re-released several times also by a Chinese label as well, and Japanese label. Yeah, the catalogue number on the back is Brew 001 because we had to think of something at the last minute to call it a catalogue number, and at the time I did a lot of home brewing and I said how about brew, and so we came up with Brew 001. So that was that. So we used to go along and sell that at gigs and everything as well, and it did us quite well. So moving on from that, obviously we then were looking for another label, something a bit bigger, somebody who'd give us some money to actually do another record. And I think the thing was, because we came from being a punk band, that made it kind of difficult, because I think a lot of the labels, they wanted people to come in and be real sort of heavy metal but with a bit of speed and a bit of thrash in them, and new young bands and everything, and we'd already been going by sort of, you know, 6-7 years by then, and it was an established sort of punk band, Annihilated. It used to be the Annihilated right at the start, but obviously I think a lot of people just thought Annihilated punk band, that's it, you know, we don't want to know about this. And of course the lyrics, which I know I said I won't go into, and I won't much, but all the lyrics are kind of social commentaries and that, so they're not about the devil and this kind of thing. It's all sort of, you know, anti-war. I don't want to belittle it in any way, but it's all that kind of thing. So I don't think that was kind of particularly popular with the record labels either. That they saw that as being a punk thing, and it, you know. So really, although we had some labels sort of sniffed about a bit because we didn't want to change the way that we did things, that made it a bit difficult. But then along came Endangered Music, and this guy, and I won't say his name, but anyway, this guy who had this little label called Endangered Music, and he signed us, and we went into the studio and recorded Created in Hate. Now, with Created in Hate, I think it could have been a brilliant album, and this is no disrespect to particularly to the guy who was the engineer and who ran the studio, because he's absolutely top bloke, really nice bloke. You'd never meet anybody better. He'd never done anything like this, so once again we're back in the situation where we're working with people who don't really know how to get what we want to get, and we don't really know how to get what we want to get, and we probably would have been better trying to find a sort of proper heavy rock, heavy metal producer really to do it, because that's kind of more the sound that we needed. But it sort of ended up because the guy who ran the record label said, "Oh yes, I'm a producer, I can do all this stuff," and he hadn't got a clue. He got no idea at all, and he wouldn't have any of the rest of the band in there when we were doing the mix except for me. Now I hadn't done it before. He obviously hadn't done it before. The guy running the studio hadn't either. So we did what we thought sounded good, and in the studio, you know, with the big set of speakers and that, it sounded great. Of course, once we got it home, it sounded pretty bad, and it has been panned over the years for its poor sound. But the thing is, the songs are good. So if you can get through the sound quality, then the songs are actually there. But I think had that been a well-recorded album, you know, then perhaps I wouldn't be sitting here making my own video. I'd have a huge team of people sort of around me filming it. Yeah, so that kind of could have done us better, but I mean, it was sort of widely acknowledged as not the first, but one of the first proper thrash metal albums to come out of the UK. Art was by a guy called Simon Bisley. Now, a lot of people really like it, and people will actually buy this just for the artwork. I personally don't like it, and there you go. I think everything about it was sort of done on the cheap, to be honest. And yeah, and the upshot was that we didn't actually get paid a penny out of this album ever for that. And yeah, so I think the less said about that one the better. I tend to try not to think about that one too much. So then we move on to this album, which is The Ultimate Desecration. Now, because of Created in Hate, like I say, we didn't get anything for doing that, and the record label sort of disappeared, which was not unheard of in the 1980s. I think things are a bit different now. There's a lot of good people around now, and brilliant independent record labels, and lots of them. But back in the 80s, I think it was probably a little bit different. So Created in Hate had actually been licensed out to a company called Metalworks anyway, and they then contacted us direct. And we did a deal with them for doing a few albums, and this was the first one. Now, we were very happy with the way things went on that. We had a bigger budget for recording. We found locally a place in Ipswich called Wildlife Recording Studios, and a guy there called Nigel Palmer, and he knew his stuff, and he did a really good job. Again, you know, production value is very different in 1989 compared to how they are now, and the sounds are very different. But for its time, I think it was very good. The cover art, again, is mid. It obviously moved on to doing sort of coloured things there. I personally think it's quite a nice cover. It's well painted and everything like that, but it hasn't got the rawness about it that obviously Path to Destruction had. And there goes my phone. But you know, it's still a good cover, and I think it was a nicely put together album. I think our thing was with this, possibly the songs maybe weren't quite as good as Created in Hate. And I know at the time one of the reviews said Annihilated have been away for sort of 18 months and hopefully they've honed their art, and you know, but it doesn't appear to be so with this album. I think the part of the problem was that we weren't as dedicated as we might have been to the band. I think it's probably fair to say that we were all probably more dedicated to going down the pub at the weekend, and the band was a bit of a second place thing. It was just a, you know, I think we all had jobs at the time and that, and we enjoyed doing it, but we weren't every evening round each other's and doing songs, and we weren't dedicated like that. It was kind of as and when it happened sort of thing. So I think by the time we did this, other bands had come along and been given loads of money by bigger record labels and kind of overtook us while we were sitting in the pub probably. But having said that, it's a good album, I do like it. The bad news was, of course, that Metalworks, they did advertising for it, and then the album was actually delayed, so it didn't come out for about 2 weeks after the advertising was out. So they had all the stuff in like Metal Hammer and Kerrang and what have you, and nobody could get the album anywhere, which didn't help. And of course, by the time the album came out, there was no advertising budget left. So it's another good old Annihilated thing that went wrong. But you know, also the thing is with this, that the record label at the time, which was Metalworks, like I say, they seemed like nice guys and all that, but they did arrange for, they said, you know, make sure your passports are in order because we're going to sort you out a tour in Germany. They sorted out a deal with BC Rich and Laney and stuff like that, so we had all this equipment on order and everything, and we got our passports sorted, and you know, we were all sort of ready to go, and they disappeared as well. And we did go and see them at one point, and they showed us, they actually had a computer in 1989, and they showed us these computer readouts of how much money and how many copies they'd sold, and we were owed quite a lot of money. And there you go, but they disappeared without a trace. And that's really when I sort of thought, oh, not again, you know, it's happened to us again, and I kind of started losing interest in the whole thing. It's not just the money, but it seemed at that point we'd got no record label, we had no tour, no gigs to back up the album, all this equipment that we'd been promised didn't happen either, and that was it for me, and I jacked it in. So that was right at the end of '89, start of 1990, so I was in the band for 5 years. Yeah, and we did it. We had a good time. We had some really good laughs and everything. I don't regret anything of it, apart from all the stuff that happened with record labels, really. And you know, but what can you do? So then, after that, the band Annihilated carried on for, I think, maybe another year or something like that. But I started up a sort of indie rock kind of band, and then Bod, the drummer out of Annihilated, he came and joined me. So we did that for a few years, and again we had some good laughs and that. We didn't actually do any records, but we did several demos. And again, it was another thing where we were more going out and partying and having a laugh than actually spending too much time on the music. But we did enjoy it. It was really good fun. Then Bod carried on. I packed up 1995 and hung my guitar up completely. In fact, put it away totally and never touched the guitar again for nearly 15 years. Or heading that way anyway, yeah, must have been. And Bod carried on. He had a couple of bands, Crow Road and Curb Slider. But when he kind of came out of that, we just had an email not long before that from this guy called Leon Makepeace, and this must have been about 2007, and yeah, I think Bod thought it was a wind-up because he said he was a 14-year-old boy and he'd found our record in a second-hand shop and all that, and could he do a website about the band. And Bod obviously thought it was a wind-up, but I contacted the guy, and he was a nice lad, and gave him a load of information and pictures, and he did a website. And then I thought, well, maybe I should just do one, you know, from our own perspective, like a sort of history of the band type of thing, and I did it. And then I started getting emails, and then we got sort of offers of people wanting to re-release the records and that, and I think the first one was a guy in Japan who wanted to re-release Path to Destruction, and I was amazed when he said, oh yeah, I live in the mountains in Japan and I've got Path to Destruction, and you know, so he, you know, we did a little deal with him, and he released that, and then we had Marquee Records in Brazil wanted to re-release both the albums, and so one night me and Bod were sitting in the pub, and he said, oh, I don't know what to do now. I've packed up with my band Curb Slider, and I sort of half jokingly said, oh well, you know, maybe we could do something with Annihilated, maybe record an EP or something like that. And so that was that, really. He was sort of going, really, do you think so? Do you think we could? And I said, yeah, it'd be a bit of a laugh. And so we got hold of Si. We knew that Lee wouldn't be interested because he'd packed in so many years ago, because you know, it must have been sort of 1990, I suppose, because he left the band just after I did. So he hadn't played for so long, we knew he wasn't going to be interested in it. And so we decided to start with just to have the three of us, me, Si and Bod, and we started up some rehearsals, and the first song that we wrote was Burden of the Southern Cross. And yeah, we kind of spent, I don't know, maybe a year or getting on for a year, I suppose, just sort of getting up to speed and writing a whole load of songs, because we didn't want to bring anybody else in and then them change what we sounded like. So we thought it'd be quite good that we were the original members, that we would write the songs and then look to bring in another guitarist to sort of fill out the sound, because by then Si had changed from guitar onto bass, which worked really, really well. So we brought Todd in, who we all knew him, known him for years, and he'd played in lots of local bands and everything, good chap. And we brought him in, and he just gelled in perfectly. We went to Purple Studios in Norwich and recorded Scorched Earth Policy, which I don't know if you can see very well because of the shine, but there you go. Yeah, so we were hit by the gremlins again as far as recording studios went, because we visited several different places and we just couldn't seem to find the right sort of people, you know, somebody who was making the right noises and was into the music that we were in. And you know, with hindsight we probably should have asked around a little bit more, but we were looking for somewhere sort of local-ish to us anyway. But as it turned out, we went to Purple in Norwich, which is a residential studio, so we did spend quite a bit of time kind of staying there and then going over to the pub in the evening and that, you know, and slept there. And you know, when we first went and visited the place, there was two guys there, and we thought, yeah, this is going to be really, really good. We're going to get something great here. But unfortunately, one of them was away on tour with the band, so we only got one of the guys. And nice guy though he was, he just didn't get what we wanted at all. So there was a lot of bits that we had to redo and everything. And then when we came to the end of it, the mix that he did was just terrible. So I ended up getting all the files off them, bringing it back here and remixing it myself. And it turned out alright, you know, I think it's a pretty good album, and it just maybe lacked that little bit of sparkle and magic that a good producer would have put on it that I wasn't able to. And by this time, songwriting wise, obviously when I joined the band first in 1985, I kind of had to, you know, sort of work my way into it a little bit songwriting wise, and then as the albums went on I did more and more of the songs. When I say songwriting, I didn't write any of the lyrics. Si always wrote all the lyrics. I think there might have been some written by Bod, but all the words are always written by Si. And in more recent times all the music would be written by me, pretty much, or 99%. So I would go along with ideas sort of that I'd recorded at home and say, right, this is the idea I've got, and we jam it and work on it, and then, you know, sort of piece things together. So everybody had input in all the songs, and that was always that way throughout all of the songs that we ever did. So I wouldn't, you know, there's only a few times probably when I actually turned up and said, right, here's a completed song. But I would go along with all the different tunes and all the parts, because Bod obviously put particular types of drums to things, and sometimes the way that he did it I might think, well, actually if we change this a little bit, that's going to work better with what he's doing. Because he plays in, rather than playing it straight, he plays quite a tuneful sort of thing, and he listens quite carefully to what you're actually doing and tries to make a drum pattern and fills and everything that actually work with it. So yeah, all the songs, everybody always had input in it. You know, more recently, particularly with Scorched Earth Policy and with the new album, which I'll talk about shortly, Deviant, I'd come up with the tunes, go along, and we jam them, and, you know, add little bits and pieces to them, and that's how songs came about. So moving on to Deviant, which I haven't got yet, even though it's supposed to be out in a couple of days' time. We haven't got them yet, so I don't know. It's supposed to be out on Friday, which is 27th of September 2013, but I haven't got them. Now, with that album, it was quite a long time in the making, because we started writing the songs. We wrote a whole load of stuff for it, and then we sort of thought, don't really know. And some of them we dropped, and some of them we changed, and then we kind of did some gigs and stuff like that, and it was a bit sort of fragmented. So it's ended up being kind of 3 years in the making. That's not 3 years solidly working on it. That's just us not getting around to doing stuff a lot of the time, as usual. But this time, recording wise, we were thinking, well, where can we go? And we thought about doing it ourselves, and I thought, no, I really want to try and find somebody who's really good. And I heard a bit of a demo by Chemikill, Ipswich band, and I thought, this sounds great. So I contacted Rob, singer and guitarist, and I said, where did you do it? And it turns out that it was only sort of 10 miles up the road, a place called HVR Studios, and the guy was called Danny. So I rang him up, and he's a great bloke, and went in, had a chat, and it was everything we ever really wanted in recording. And we went along and recorded it, and the whole process was easy, because, well, to be honest, how I tend to do it now anyway is that, unlike the old days of tape, where we'd just go in, and I usually had an idea of roughly what pace the song should go, but we'd work it out sort of on the day. What I tend to do the last two albums, and particularly with Deviant, is that I did click tracks for all of the songs and put guide guitars on in advance. So then Bod had those recordings so as he could go away and practice his drums and make sure that he could play at that speed, you know, and get everything kind of spot on before we went in the studio. Because if you go in the studio and then you're going, oh, I can't do it, I've got to change it, that all takes time, and of course you're paying by the hour and by the day anyway. So it works really, really well to actually have the click tracks, have all the guides done, everybody knows what all the parts are. So I mapped out everything, all the songs were done on Pro Tools, and then basically took in my hard drive with all the songs on Pro Tools, and we just imported them into the computer on the studio. So that way all the click tracks, all the markers were there, everything's in there, even the guide guitars, so we didn't have to stand around doing it. And because we'd done it that way, Bod already knew that he could play the drums and how everything sort of went together anyway. And I think we even had guide vocals on it as well, so, you know, it was all well planned. Which is so much easier than the old ways that you used to do it, because you'd come out of the studio and you think, oh, we played that a bit slow and that, whereas this way we could get it just how we wanted it. So yeah, there wasn't really any problems with that. Now when you listen to the album, if you download the version, well, hopefully you probably won't be seeing this video at the moment if you downloaded it, but the download versions have got the individual songs, whereas the full CD version I won't say it's a concept album, although it was supposed to be originally. It's got kind of bits, all the songs are linked by different pieces, so it all follows for a story. Now originally it was going to be a complete concept album, but unfortunately some people didn't really like the way the story was sounding and all that, so it ended up a little bit fragmented. Don't get me wrong, I think it's the best album that we've ever done, but it just didn't quite end up the way that we thought it was going to. But all the link pieces on the album we recorded here, so we didn't really use any samples or anything, so when you hear sort of waves splashing on the beach, I'm like 300 yards away from the beach, so I went up there with my recorder and I recorded the waves. And like a riot scene, Todd came round here, and me and him and my son Bryn, we just went out in the garden and bashed a load of stuff about to make a sort of riot scene, did a load of shouting, recorded some helicopters and police cars and stuff like that, put it all on there. You know, and even like the bits where there's footsteps of somebody walking into a church, that was actually done here, just with Si with his boots on, sort of stamping on the floor, and we recorded that here. My wife was also on there, she's done a couple of pieces on there as well. Yeah, so it was all, it's all been great fun getting all these people involved and doing it. Obviously a bit tough sometimes, everybody agreeing that that's how we wanted it, but yeah, so I'm going to move on now. So that's sort of iDeviant covered, really. Good friend of mine, Colin, has sent me a list of questions and that, as an idea of what people might want to know. Because like I say, I didn't want to do the usual, I can't really do the usual, when are you doing your next gig and what's happening, this, that and the other, because obviously I'm not actually in the band anymore. But yeah, so here's his little list of questions, so I'll just briefly see if I can go through these and see if we can have some answers. So how did you come to join Annihilated? Well, I covered that one. I knew them from playing in a previous band, and they rang me. Why did you leave? Last time round was I just couldn't be bothered anymore, and this time round I started off, I just didn't want to play gigs anymore, and I never did when we got back together in 2007, 2008. I said I don't want to do any gigs, we'd just make an album or an EP or something. But of course Si and Bod, particularly Si, is just like born to be on a stage, and so I just went along with it and we did the gigs, and we had a brilliant time. We went to Norway and Germany and France and Holland and that, and the funniest times of my life, I reckon, and we had a great time. But I just not bothered about the playing side of it, and it came to that sort of 5-year thing again, really, and because we hadn't rehearsed together for about 9 months, I think, because we'd had a bit of a break over Christmas and that sort of thing when we'd done the recording, I just thought it was a good time to say I don't want to play live anymore now. And that was all fine, because then fortunately Danny B from the studio said, oh yeah, I'll do it, and I thought brilliant. But I think I obviously thought I could still go on and write some songs and contribute things, but I think if you're not actually in the band or not full time there, you just can't really, it's just not going to work. And there was a few things, we had problems with the artwork. That was a right pain trying to get the artwork sorted out, and it never worked out. And in the end it was so much hassle and stress and everything trying to sort it out. I just said, look, I'm not going to do it anymore, you lot can get on with it. And there was no big, it wasn't a big argument or anything like that, it's just the whole thing, I thought this just isn't going to work, I could see it wouldn't work, so that's why I left. It says memorable characters. Well, obviously Colin, of course, #1 fan for so many years. Met him back in the 80s. I think that probably would have been at the London, the Clarendon, Hammersmith Clarendon. Don't think it's there anymore, but yeah, we did some gigs there, and I remember him coming up and meeting us and everything, and stage diving and that, and he's a brilliant bloke. There's loads of other people that I could mention as well, particularly who've helped us out over the past few years, obviously Colin being a big one of them. I'm not going to go into mention a load of names though, because the trouble is I know I'm going to miss somebody off. Those people who've helped us, if they watch this video, will know who they are, and we do really appreciate all the help and everything, and they've been absolutely brilliant. So there's a handful of people probably I put into that category, and I'm sure they know who they are. You know, but then when we've been abroad and that, we've met lots of people at gigs and stuff like that, and they're fantastic, you know. So where did the band's name come from? Oh, I don't know, it's just a punk thing, isn't it? And of course it's spelt with one N, and there was always this thing about somebody being dyslexic and getting it wrong and just misspelling it. But I think what happened when they drew the logo, they just thought it looked better with one N rather than two. I think it's as shallow as that. Proudest moment? Oh, I don't know. Possibly getting, you know, making the first EP and kind of having that in our hands and thinking that's something that we'd made ourselves, you know. What did you learn from your time in the band? That's a difficult one. Loads and loads of stuff, obviously musically and personally as well. I don't really know if I can say one particular thing that I learnt from that. I mean, you know, trouble is being in a band is like sort of having family, because you all become mates and everything like that. And the problem is when you leave, no matter that you all say to each other, oh yeah, we'll keep in touch, we'll go out for a drink, or we'll do this, that and the other, it doesn't happen the same, because you're not in part of that little gang anymore, you know. So that's something I always say I learnt. Memorable fans. Yeah, same thing again. Obviously we've got Andy Franks as well as Colin Tyler. Andy Franks, a memorable fan because he contacted us, and so I had done an interview and a story about how one of his teeth had got broken at a gig by getting smashed in the face with a microphone, and Andy wrote to us and said, yes, that was me. Yes, favourite song and why? That's really tough. I would possibly say, well, I mean, I really like, let's have a look, on this album, Cruel Twist of Fate is good. Trouble is, some of the songs that are good on the albums aren't necessarily so good live, because we did experiment with playing some of the stuff off the new album last year at gigs, and you know, didn't really work quite so well. But I think, yeah, I really like Full Circle on here. I think that's a great song, but live it sort of died a death, because I think at the end of the day people expect us to make a whole load of racket, and that isn't all racket. There's some quieter bits in that. But I think on the new album, I like all of the songs on the new album, everything that's on there. But possibly, you know, the final song, I'm trying to remember what the hell it's called, but the final song on the album anyway, really like that, the closing one. Threshold as well is really great, but I do like them all. And you know what's coming up next? It's going to be least favourite and why. And I was looking through the albums and everything earlier and thinking, well, I do like all the songs, because obviously, you know, I wrote a lot of the tunes. I would probably say off this album it's probably going to be Lost Souls, because it just sort of drags and a bit boring, really. Yeah, another favourite song is Internal Darkness on the Ultimate Desecration as well, because I remember we tried to do an instrumental, and we did one on Created in Hate, and somebody said, well, it's not an instrumental, it's just a song without words. So I tried it again. I thought, right, alright, really good instrumental. And so I did Internal Darkness on this album, and I thought, yeah, this is absolutely brilliant. And when we got to the studio, I just realised it just didn't work. It was still another song without words. So we didn't add a lot of words, but Si added some words, and he sat there in the studio and wrote these words, and he added some little acoustic guitar bits, and that made it. That really made it. Because otherwise it was another song, instrumental, just without words, or normal song without words. What time are we on? Right, okay, so what guitar do you use and why? Well, to be honest, back in the back in the day, back in the 80s, it would have just been whatever I could get that looked smart. I had an Ibanez Roadstar. That was probably one of my main ones, but I don't know if I had it when I was in Annihilated or not, but yeah, just whatever. I did have a Les Paul Gold Top at one time, which was always I really wanted one, and you know, I bought it, played a couple of gigs with it, and it's so heavy it used to make my shoulder ache, so I stopped playing it. But I now use, if you can see in the background, I've got a Jackson. I had a couple of those with Annihilated. They're the DK, what are they called now? Can't remember. DK2M, that's the one, meaning maple. And they're absolutely brilliant, because back in the 80s, obviously, you'd get broken strings and the guitars would go out of tune and everything like that, and these Jacksons are absolutely brilliant. It sounds fantastic, stays in tune, you can take it anywhere, do anything with it, and it's still going to be in tune. And yeah, I love those. Plans for the future? Well, I don't really know at the moment. I mean, I have come up with some ideas for tunes and that, you know, songs. At the moment I'm not doing anything with it, I'm just having a break from it, but I think possibly over this winter time I might look at doing something. I've got some people who would sort of collaborate with me, but it definitely won't be any gigs, won't be any albums or anything like that. If I do any recording, it will really just be purely for me. And I might put it out there like free download or something like that, but I have no intention of doing any kind of commercial release at all. What advice would you give to a new guitarist? None, really. I don't think I've got any good advice to give to it really shows what I learned, doesn't it, really? What advice would I give to a new band? You know, do your own thing and don't listen to what anybody else says is probably it. And that's probably the same to a guitarist as well, because I think a lot of it is about learning, making mistakes and everything like that, but enjoying it. I mean, when we started out, when I first started playing, I didn't even realise you actually had to tune a guitar, and we sat there in the bedroom and made up these songs and everything, and it sounded awful, but we enjoyed it, you know. And I think the thing is, now everybody comes into it and they're all sort of really brilliant and everything, and I think a little bit of that naivety is lost, and it's a bit of a shame, really. I think people should just, rather than copying other people's songs, just make their own, do their own thing and do whatever they want. What would I do differently? Yeah, I suppose really I probably should have spent a bit more time on the songs and tried to improve myself as a guitarist. I should have done, really, because, you know, I'm not a great guitarist and I wish I was. That's probably one thing that I would improve, is that I would have studied more on doing that rather than being in the pub all the time. Influences, you know, that's the thing, is that when we went into the studio, and well, anytime we've been in the studio, if somebody says, oh yeah, what about that riff that sounds a bit like so and so that you do, I hate all that, and I hate it when people sort of compare you to other people or say that's a bit Slayer-esque, which was our main problem. I stopped listening, no offence to Slayer, but I stopped listening to them and Metallica years and years and years ago, and part of it was because people would say, oh, that sounds like so and so. So the funny thing is that we've had lots of things over the years where people have said, oh, that riff is like blah blah blah, and I don't even know who they're talking about. I've never even heard of them, and I've written the riff, so I can't have copied it. But yeah, so I don't really have any big influences. I mean, I liked, in my early years, obviously I liked Rush, and I liked Saxon and Motorhead and all bands like that, and Queen, although I never copied anything they did, and you know, there's lots of good bands out there now as well, but I wouldn't say I really take any influence from any of them, and I always just kind of sit there and try and do my own thing. If it ends up sounding like something else, what can you do? How did being in a band change you? I don't know. Well, I suppose it must have had some effect on me, but it's difficult to say because I don't know how I would have been beforehand, because I mean I started in a band when I was like 15, so most of my kind of adult life I've been in a band, apart from a sort of 10-year patch in the middle. You know, when I obviously got married and had kids and settled down to a normal life, but then went back to it. So I don't know about that. How's the latest album changed you? No, I don't know. You know, I don't think it has. I think that, you know, the main big thing is that I've obviously left the band, as we've said already. But it wasn't anything to do because of that album or anything. I think I was getting to a point where I was sort of thinking, well, we've had a brilliant laugh, we've done this now, and I just didn't really particularly want to do it anymore. So I don't think that's particularly changed me, but you know, I suppose in a way maybe it stops you getting too old, because you know, we turned up to some of these gigs and there's all these young kids there and we're like, oh no, you know, we're all old and everything like that, but they were brilliant, they were really, really good. So there wasn't any problem there, and maybe it keeps you a little bit younger, I don't know, but look at the grey hair though, look, stress, isn't it? How do you go about writing songs? Do you have a particular ritual or process, and where do you write? Well, I can't speak for Si, because as I said, he writes all the lyrics and I would write the music, and I didn't have any kind of ritual apart from needing time. You know, you can't nip in and go, oh, I've got 5 minutes spare, I'll write a quick song. You know, you need to have a bit of time and a bit of peace. And I'd come in here and just start playing my guitar, you know, and then I might kind of go, oh, that's I've got a riff there, I've got an idea. Plug into my Pro Tools and record it, and I'd have a project set up where I'd record lots of different riffs and kind of listen through to them and think what's good, or maybe that one will go with that one, and I'll try and piece things together and stuff like that. So I would sort of do it like that. I didn't often write riffs with other people. I know me and Si did for the early albums, and me and Bod did as well, because we used to spend time on Sunday mornings when we'd get up from being out on the Saturday night, and we used to sit there, and sometimes what we'd do is he would actually go, I've got an idea for a tune, and then he'd hum something, and most of the time it didn't make any sense, and every time he hummed it was different. But you know, sometimes he'd hum things and go, how about doing this, how about doing this? So he had, you know, input on the riffs as well, and I'd try and play what he was saying. For the last two albums though, it's mainly been sitting here, and we've had a couple of different rehearsal places sort of in and around Ipswich. But a lot of the time when we're rehearsing, it seems like a bit of a waste of time if we're sitting there trying to write riffs and Bod can't do anything on the drums because we'd be going, shut up, we can't hear anything. So I preferred to write at home, record stuff, then take it along, play it to them all and go, right, how do you feel about this? And then we'd kind of play it through and jam it, and then maybe I'd add in another bit and we'd kind of move on like that. So that kind of also answers the next question, which was, where do you write? And that's, you know, mostly here, and I guess Si would write his lyrics at home. I don't know where in the house that he would write them particularly, and I don't really want to know. But yeah, how was the order of the tracks on this album decided? Well, this album was a bit different because it used to be that, you know, whatever you think kind of flowed through. So you want to start with a strong song, and then have another one that's also good and not quite so good, and you know, albums always sort of tail off a little bit and then pick up a bit at certain points, and then you have a slow one, so you know, you kind of map your album out like that really. But this album was a little bit different because it was meant to be originally more of a sort of story. But some of the songs, although we had this 3-year period to actually write them and sort them out and everything, some of them weren't kind of finalised until quite late on. So the final order wasn't until sort of fairly late, and I think Si pretty much did that because he actually mapped out what was going where, and then the ideas for what things would be linking the different songs. So he came up with quite a lot of those sort of linking ideas, and then I actually recorded them. Some of them me and Todd did, because there was ones where there was just a gap and there was nothing, and we sat here and, you know, me and Todd would sit here in the evening and think, right, what can we do to that? And we sort of add our own stuff in. And I think that turned out really, really well. I like the fact that we did it that way and made all our own sounds and didn't use samples and that. So it's everything you hear on there, we did it. Yeah, so I think that's the end of the questions from Colin, and thank you very much for giving me those questions. I guess that's it from me, and thanks again to everybody over the years who helped with the band and has helped me out musically and that. And yeah, maybe I'll do something in the future, and if you're watching this, keep an eye out for what I do, and appreciate your time watching it. Cheers.